just include the scripture in the sermon. I'm going to actually read it this morning. One verse. We're going off one verse this morning of Mark chapter 14, 54. This is the verse. It says, "And Peter followed him at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest. And he was sitting with the guards, warming himself by the fire." That's what caused the sermon this morning. I'm going to dismiss the children if they want to go downstairs, and anyone else that wants to go with them. If you think it would be more interesting downstairs, this isn't a competition, you are welcome to go. And if you want to stay here, that's great as well. One of the things normally, the last few times I've preached here, I've preached before this at Kelowna Mennonite, and so I'm preaching there, and they moved the sermon to the beginning of the service there, and then they do more songs and announcements and things afterwards. So as soon as I'm done, I head out, they're singing a song, I head out, I jump in my car, I drive as fast as I legally can to get here, and you guys have already started, and I come in, and it's a whole different atmosphere when you walk in, and it's already going on, and you're trying to get your mic and your PowerPoint and figure everything out. But it also gives you a clue as to how long I preached, because the later I get here, the longer winded I was. And so this morning, you have no idea how long this is going to go. And either do I, really. We'll see. So it's Palm Sunday, right? And what do you preach about on Palm Sunday? I had the privilege a year ago on Palm Sunday. I was here also, and I preached about Christ's triumphal entry and the kind of the ticker tape parade as Christ came in and everybody was celebrating that the King had finally come, the Messiah was coming, and he was going to take his throne. And that was the normal Palm Sunday sermon, right? But I've been here enough that you guys know that I am not your normal kind of preacher. And so we're not covering that this week. We're doing something different, and we're actually going to be looking closer to the crucifixion the night before. And we're going to be looking in particular at Peter. And we'll be looking at that verse that I read, and we're going to be looking at some others as well. And if I turn this on, that is supposed to be a set of binoculars looking in the distance with Peter and the Roman guards there as the backdrop. And so we're actually going to start this morning with a little bit of background before we get to where we're going to be this morning. Just prior to this, Jesus had been with his disciples for the Passover meal. And they had celebrated this Passover meal. That's where Jesus, after the Passover meal, he took some bread, he broke it, he handed it to his disciples, said, "Take, this is my body." He had a glass of wine, he shared it with his disciples, said, "This is my blood. Do this in remembrance of me." That's where we get what we call communion. What we call it the Last Supper now, because it was his last meal. It was also the time when Jesus washed the disciples' feet. And so he went around and he was washing his feet, and you remember Peter. Peter's like, "Oh, no, you're not washing my feet." It's like, that's something that servants do, and I'm not gonna have my God washing my feet. And Jesus is like, "No," he says, If you don't allow me to do this, you have nothing to do with me. And Peter was like, "Then I'm all in, man. Wash all of me, right? Pour the bucket on me. Make me clean. I want to be with you." And Jesus said, "No, that's not really necessary either." So after this meal, after sharing the bread and wine, after the foot wash, Jesus and his disciples went out to the Garden of Gethsemane, to the Mount of Olives. And okay, I got to make sure I know which one I'm pushing here. In Mark 14, starting with verse 26, it says, "When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said to them, 'You will all fall away, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee.' Peter said to him, 'Even though they all fall away, I will not.' And Jesus said to him, 'Truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he said emphatically, 'If I must die with you, I will not deny you.' And all the others said the same." So Jesus is here, and he quotes from Zechariah regarding his death, saying, I'm going to die and everybody's going to scatter, but after I've risen, I will see you again in Galilee. And then he told Peter that Peter was going to deny him 3 times. And I love Peter, but man, I feel sorry for the guy sometimes, because it's like the authors set out to give Peter the bad rap, right? I mean, Peter says, even if I die with you, I'll never deny you. And all the other disciples said the same thing. They all said it, and Peter gets called out. Doesn't really seem fair, does it? Why is it that Peter is always the one who gets called out when it's like they all agree with him, they're all saying it, and then the author's like, yeah, but Peter, let's nail him with this one. How many of us do the same sort of thing? Right? We get called out on something, and then we're like Peter, and we double down. First Peter says, hey, I'm not gonna do this, and then he said, man, even if I have to die with you, I'm not going to deny you. Right? So he doubles down. We know the answers we're supposed to give. We know that the answer. And how many of us would do the same thing, that we say, man, Jesus, I'm never going to leave you. I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. I'm going to go wherever you send me. Even if I have to die with you, I'm not going to deny you. See, Peter said it, but we probably would have. I would have if I had been there, because we know it's the thing that we're supposed to say. And when I look at these accounts in the Gospels, one of the things I love about the Gospels is that each one gives a little different slant, right? We have four different accounts of Jesus' life: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And each author, 4 different people wrote them. Each one had a different purpose and a different person he was writing this down for. And so they included different details. Just like if you would go home and tell somebody about the church service here in Westchester today, each of you would say different things. Some of you might talk about the kids with palm branches. Some of you might mention a song that you didn't know. Some of you might mention that I was preaching, or whatever it is, but we would all talk about different things. And when you put them all together, you get a more complete picture. And so we can do that here with the Gospels. If we were to look at the same account in John 18, verses 1 through 3, it says, when he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples, crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side, there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. And then John includes a detail that Mark did not. He says, now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. And so we piece this together, and we can see that things got a little bit intense here, because Jesus and disciples, they're in the garden, right? And it's night, and it's quiet. They maybe hear the crickets, and that's about it. Maybe a little rustling of the leaves in the breeze. And then all of a sudden, this silence is broken with this big mob of people, this detachment of soldiers, these guards and whatnot are coming. They're coming with torches. They're coming with lanterns. They're soldiers and loud voices. And chaos erupts, right? This chaos, this quiet has been interrupted. But because the disciples were there with Jesus, they were brave. They were brave because they had seen Jesus' power. They had seen Jesus' power over sickness. They had seen Jesus' power over evil spirits and evil forces. They'd seen Jesus' power over the weather, right? Jesus calms a storm. They'd seen Jesus' power over death when Jesus raised people from the dead. They had seen Jesus' power in all of these sorts of things. Man, when you're with the guy who controls the weather, or knows about it, when you're with the guy who can walk on water, who can raise the dead, who can heal the sick, who can cast out evil spirits, you feel pretty secure, don't you? And so the disciples were with Jesus and feeling very brave. See, they said that they would die with him, but they really didn't think that was much of a possibility, because when you're with the guy who raises people from the dead and who heals, like you're in good hands. And this chaos ensued, and then suddenly Christ wasn't showing his power. Christ wasn't fighting back. But these guys, they took matters into their own hands, right? The disciples, they were there, and they were going to defend him. And I imagine the soldiers, they're coming in, they're grabbing the disciples, they're grabbing Jesus, and they start fighting back. No, you're not taking, no, we're protecting Jesus. He's behind, we've got him. And Peter, gotta love Peter, man. He whips out his sword. He is all in this. He's, a guy with a sword against a detachment of Roman soldiers, right? Odds aren't real good, but he knows who's got his back. And Peter's like, yeah, and he starts swinging the sword. And in this chaos, he makes contact, right? He strikes the servant. Now, I don't know how you cut off someone's ear without taking off their head. So this servant, maybe he had really good reflexes and was ducking as Peter swat. Anyway, the ear goes flying, right? And in this chaos, all of a sudden, I imagine Jesus going, stop, enough, stop. And everybody like, whoa, okay, it's coming now, it's coming. He's going to, and Jesus, he shakes off the Roman soldier who's got hold of him, and Jesus, he walks over, and I imagine him picking up this ear, and he looks at it, and he looks at the servant, and he walks over to him. Servant, he's got blood streaming down, it's coming off his neck, it's all, and Jesus takes that ear, puts it back on, and it looks like, it's healed. There's not even a scar. Yet there's blood everywhere as evidence that something happened, but there's not even a scar. This thing is healed, and everybody's confused. Right? What's going on? But they're also confused not only about what's happening, they're confused, why isn't Christ defending himself? Because he could control sickness, he could control weather, he could control death, he could surely control the Roman guards and the temple guards, right? And then all this was happening, and this realization must have hit them that they were with Christ and defending him, trying to defend him, but he was going to give himself up, right? He was going to be taken prisoner. He was going to be taken captive. And if they stayed with him, they were going to be taken as well. So they were ready to fight with him, not to roll over and give up, right? And that seemed to be what Christ was doing. It's like he wasn't fighting back. He was just submitting to them. And Jesus, he wasn't responding like the disciples thought he would. And because of that, they didn't know how to respond. And so in 14, verse 50, it says, then everyone deserted him and fled. And we look at these guys sometimes and it's easy to criticize them. But wouldn't we have probably done the same thing? I mean, if this morning, if a detachment of 15 or 20 guys carrying weapons and wearing masks breaks down the front door and comes storming in here, and they're after me, for instance, or after one of us, what would your response be? Some of you might try to take them on. Some of us, myself included, we'd probably be heading underneath the pew. The ones of you who attend here often, you know where all the doors are at. You know that if you go out that door, you know where it goes. I don't know where that door goes. I don't know if I can go out or if that's the storeroom, right? I don't know that I'm heading for that door. I might be cornered there. But we would probably scatter, right? It's our human nature. And so that's what the disciples did. They fled. They left him. They were no longer with him. They had walked or ran away from their Savior. See, they had started out with him in the upper room. They had gone to the garden with him. They had promised that even if it required it, they would die with him. And they were with him in this fight against these guards when they thought they were defending him, but then they ran away and they left him alone. And how many times have we followed Jesus, promising to stay by his side, and then things get tough? And it's like, oh, that might be more of a payment than I want to make. I'm not sure I want to pay that price. And so we take off and we run, or we flee, or we desert him. Picking up in this verse that we read earlier, Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he sat with the guards and warmed himself by the fire. And this is the verse. Sometimes when you're reading or you're studying, and there's one verse that you've read many times. I underline in my Bible when I read, and I read in different translations sometimes, but then if something strikes me in one, I'll go back and underline it in what I consider my main Bible. And I've got all different colors from either different years I've been reading or different verses. And this verse is underlined multiple times, so I know it's caught my attention, but it never really sat or never sunk in, because this is a turning point, because Peter followed at a distance. Right? At a distance. Peter was no longer with Christ. He was no longer close enough that Christ could just reach out and save him. You know, when Peter had walked on the water, and when he looked around at the storm all of a sudden and he started sinking, he's like, "Lord, save me!" And Jesus could reach out and grab him. The distance is now too great for that. Peter is at a distance. He could no longer hear Christ whisper something to him. He could no longer look him into the eye and read what he was saying. He was at a distance. But not only was he at a distance, notice where he was. He was with the guards. Right? Just that thought, it gives me the creeps. You get this ominous feeling that something really bad is going to happen. Because instead of being with Christ, who just hours earlier he said, "Man, I'm going to stick beside you even to death," he's now at a distance at home with the enemy. He's with the very guys who had arrested Christ. And that distance caused a mind shift, because he was no longer a participant with Christ. Instead, he was an observer. I didn't put this one up on the screen, but in Matthew's account of this, Matthew says, he entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. Or another translation says, he sat with the guards to see the end. See, he was there to see what was going to happen, not to take part of it himself. He was there to see the end. He was scared for his own life, and I imagine him sitting there, not too close to the fire, and watching what was going on with Jesus and listening to the guards around him. Right? Probably had his coat kind of pulled up around his neck. He had his hat pulled down a little bit. He was kind of looking down so nobody would see his face. And listening as these guards are talking about, what is with this Jesus guy anyways? I mean, yeah, we arrested him, but what did he really do? He upset a bunch of people. So what? We all upset people, right? That's not something that you would kill somebody for. What's with this Jesus guy? And not only that, he's just taking it, right? And I imagine the guards having some sort of conversation like this, and Peter listening, or maybe the guards were there and enjoying this abuse and looking at that guy, he hasn't sworn once. All of this beating he's going through, this whipping, this crown we put on his heads, and he's not saying a thing. Let's ramp it up. Let's see which one of us can break him, right? Which one of us can beat him enough that he finally yells for mercy. I don't know what the conversation was, but Peter is there, and imagine him listening to the guards, trying to stay close enough to the fire to get some warmth, but at the same time trying to remain in the shadows a little bit so as not to draw attention to himself. And it worked for a while. But then, in verse 66, one of the servant girl of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warm himself by the fire, she looked closely at him. And I imagine her looking and him kind of trying to look away and her looking at him. She said, "You were with that Nazarene Jesus," she said. But he denied it. "I don't know or understand what you're talking about," he said. And he went out to the entryway. And this is gut-wrenching. I've read this account so many times, and you just read over it. But here is Peter at a distance from Christ, having been accused of being with Christ. He's at a distance and being accused of having been with him. And the servant, like I said, she gets up and she peers under, and the others are present. But this was a conversation between Peter and the servant girl. The servant girl was directly talking to Peter. "You were with him." And Peter responds that he doesn't know. what she's talking about. But just as important of what he says is what he does. And I don't know that I'd ever pieced that together before. Because you see what he does? He got up and went to the entryway. He had been in the courtyard, and when this happened, he got up and went to the entryway. He actually moved farther away from Jesus. He increased the distance. And this servant girl, she doesn't give up. So when she saw him there, she said again to those standing around, "This fellow is one of them." Again, he denied it. So imagine that she sees him, and now she goes, notice, now she's not talking to Peter. Now she's talking to those that are around him. She's like, "Hey," first it was, "Peter, you're one of them." Peter's like, "No." Then she's telling others because he didn't respond. She's like, "Hey, you guys, he's one of them." After a little while, those standing nearby said to Peter, "Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." And so she turned up the heat on him, and he again denies being a Christ follower. But then those around, they start paying attention to him. And again, in the low light, and I imagine them all, everyone, after she says, they're all kind of looking at him, and they're checking him out. And if you've ever been in those situations, you just want a hole to crawl into, right? You've been called out for something, it's like, no, just let me alone, And I imagine him there with his head down, and maybe his back to any fire so that the light wouldn't be shining in his face. And they're all looking at him. And then it says he began to call down curses and swore to them, "I don't know this man you're talking about." And notice that this time, as Peter had increased his distance from Christ, that his denial is getting even stronger. Because first, he said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And now, like this stereotypical sailor, he begins to swear and curse. And it's not, "I don't know what you're talking about." It's, "I don't even know the man that you're talking about." And before he could even think about this, before he could even realize what he said, that stupid rooster crowed. Right? Immediately, the rooster crowed the second time, and Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken to him, "Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. And he broke down and he wept. And I cannot imagine what was going through Peter's mind. Right? It tore him up. He recognized his failure. All this time with Jesus, all the things that he had been seeing, recognizing Jesus as the Messiah, as the promised one. And he had just denied that he knew him. And what a crushing guilt. Right? No other failure would compare to that. We don't see it here, but in Matthew's account, and again, I didn't put this one up on the screen. Matthew writes, "Immediately the rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus spoken. Before the rooster crows, you'll disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly." Notice again, he moved even farther away. He starts out in the courtyard. He ends up going to the entryway. And now he goes outside, even farther away from Christ. At the time that he should have been with Jesus or moving towards Jesus, Peter was moving farther and farther away. And guess what? That's kind of where I'm stopping with this today. We're going to come back and look at it a little bit more. That's where I'm stopping today. But before I do, just let me say that there is hope. Right? There is hope because Jesus and the disciples, we don't see the disciples again until after Christ's death, if we would keep reading. But when Peter heard about the resurrection, what did he do? He ran to the grave. He realized his mistakes. He wanted nothing more than to be with Jesus again, not at a distance, but at his side. So that is the hope. But we know nothing of the other disciples during all of this. Right? They're not mentioned at all. So in this account, let's just look at Peter for a few minutes here as I wrap up, and the different places or stages he was and how that might relate to us and where we find ourselves. Because there's so much that we can learn from him. So let's look at this. So he starts out at what we call the Last Supper, at the Passover meal, right there in the upper room, Peter was with Jesus. I mean, he was right there. They're sharing a cup, right? Jesus is breaking bread and handing it to him. I mean, they are as close as you can get. Jesus is washing his feet. Pretty intimate time, right? Especially in our culture, we're not comfortable with that. I don't know if you ever do foot washing here. I come from a tradition that does it sometimes, and it's awkward. It is awkward. And Peter is he's refusing, he's learning, he's like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. And then he's like, wash all of me, and he's back and forth. But Peter was all in. Right? He had no comprehension of what he was in for, but he was all in. And during this time, Jesus, like I said, he shared the bread. He said, this is my body, this is my blood. And Peter was close. He was right there. And maybe that is you this morning. Maybe you are right there. Maybe you're a new believer and you're right there. Maybe you've been a believer for years, for most of your life, but you are right there. You're a follower, but you maybe don't really know what's going on. You don't know what all of this means. What's going to happen? And it's okay. The disciples I don't think they comprehended what Jesus was doing when he broke that bread and said, this is my body. And they're like, this is bread, Jesus. What are you talking about now? And he took a glass of wine and said, this is my blood. And the disciples were like, did you have too much of that wine already? Right? They didn't totally get it. If we don't totally get it, that's okay. We have lots of room that we can grow. Maybe that's where you are. Or maybe you've heard about the upcoming challenges. Like I said, it's easy to follow Christ when things are going well. Right? Peter was in the garden, and it's a nice night. It's calm. The moon is out. And yeah, everyone falls away. I'm not going to. And I hope we all say that, and I hope we all mean it. I know Peter did. But life doesn't always go like we plan. Right? In some ways, I hope this is where we find ourselves, in the garden with Jesus, ready to fight whatever comes our way, ready to do whatever, insisting that we'll always be faithful. Or maybe you feel like Peter when the arresting party showed up. And like I said, Peter, he gets a bad rap sometimes, but you have to admit, he was all in at this point. Soldiers arrive, Peter's got a little sword, and they're like, we're here to arrest Jesus. And he's like, over my dead body. And they're like, yeah, we can arrange that. And he's like, no, wait. And he starts, right? I mean, Peter was all in. When you've got 2 guys, 12 guys, 2 of them have a sword, and you have a whole contingent of soldiers coming at you, you got to be all in. And I wish more of us were here. I wish more of us, that we're all in and we are ready to defend. When we hear people attacking God, when we hear people mocking Jesus, when we see people making fun of the resurrected one, do we stand by or do we swing the sword? See, Christ, he doesn't need us to defend him. I mean, an all-powerful God, he doesn't need us to come to his rescue. But yeah, we should be ready, and are we willing to fight those battles? Maybe he didn't do it the right way, but I have to admire his willingness to jump in and defend Jesus. Are we willing to go out on that limb? Are we willing to go out on that limb that might result in our death as well, like Peter did? And remember, Peter wasn't fighting from a distance. He was with Jesus yet at this point. He was with him in the heat of the battle. And if you're following Jesus, you will go through some spiritual battles. Or maybe you're like Peter after Christ told him to put the sword away. And you know that if you stay close to Jesus, it is going to cost you something. And it might cost you your life. And so you run. You run. Mark says, everyone deserted him and fled. Have you given up? Have you run? Have you realized the cost of following Jesus and said, I'm not sure it's a cost I can pay? Right? If that's you this morning, know that there is hope. Know that there's hope. Come talk to me, talk to Pastor Richard. Let us walk with you. Let us try to clarify some things and help you. Or maybe you are like Peter, following from a distance. and hanging out with the guards. And if this is where you are, this is not where you want to stay. Because you can't follow Christ from a distance. The farther you get from him, the easier it is to get sidetracked, the easier it is to get distracted, the easier it is to deny him, to ignore him, to just sit back and watch instead of participating, observing. When you're distanced from him, you will not be with the people that you want to hang out with. You'll be with the people that want to hang Jesus. So nothing good happens from a distance. You remember the account of the rich man and Lazarus, right? The rich man, he had it all. He had money, he had wealth, he had the clothes, and Lazarus was the beggar lying at the gate. And the rich man would pass him, and the beggar was just pleading for something to eat. It's an account, that story Jesus told. They both end up in eternity. And Lazarus is with Abraham in heaven, and the rich man is in Hades. And the rich man, it says, he sees Lazarus, and it says he sees him far off, or he sees him at a distance. See, it's the same root word as what Peter was. He was at a distance. And there was no way that he could cross that. There was a chasm there. So the rich man, he's pleading, and he cannot cross because he is at a distance from Christ. And so if you're at a distance, you can't follow. I plead with you to come closer. At a distance from God is a terrible place to be. Maybe you've just plain messed up. Maybe you've done the unthinkable. You can't imagine Christ or anyone else forgiving you, and you just go away and weep. And if that's where you are this morning, then don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. In fact, come back next week, because next week we're celebrating Christ's resurrection. Right? When Christ overcame, he had paid the debt for all of these things that we do when we mess up. And when Peter heard the good news, he ran to the tomb. All dignity aside, nothing mattered except getting back into the presence of Jesus. In fact, when he got to the tomb, he didn't stop. He got to the tomb. He went on in. Like, I don't know that I want to be here, right? Peter, man, he is all in. He was searching for a risen Savior. So even if you are here, even if you are at this distance, weeping over the failures, hang tight, because Jesus, man, he later welcomed Peter back with open arms, and he'll do the same thing for you. This week we're going to be remembering the darkest days in history, right? The days when we killed Jesus, the day we killed our God. But next Sunday we're going to be celebrating the greatest day in history, when he resurrected from the grave, having died for our sins so that we can spend eternity in his presence, so that we can be with him. And he died, and he made that offer for everybody. No matter who you are, what you've done, the offer of forgiveness is there, but it is an offer that needs to be accepted. When it is, it will change your life. Peter, he ended up going through all sorts of persecution, but he never again wavered in his faith. And he never was at a distance from his Savior. And it is my hope that the same can be said for all of us. I'm going to put in a plug. If you are watching this online, I invite you to come and be with us if you're at all able. There's something different. Just as Peter was sitting at a distance, he was watching what was happening to see what would happen. We learned that during COVID. If you're at home watching this, you're watching it. It's not the same as participating. I invite you to come if you're at all able. If you have health issues or something else and you aren't able to be here, that's fine. I'm glad that you are able to watch. But if you can, please come and join us and be with us. This time, I'm going to say we're going to cut off that part and go into our sharing time. If anybody has sharing that they would like to